Welcome to Not Yinz Father's podcast. I'm Jake. I have my friends Sean and Corey on with me. This is a Steelers podcast that's going to discuss the draft, free agency, this past season, and what we'd like to see happen in the future. We're Steelers fans. We've been talking Steelers for a long time, and we've discussed potentially doing a podcast like this, and we're giving this a shot. This is our pilot episode, so bear with us. Sean?
I'm Sean, lifetime Steeler fan. This episode, we're going to touch on a little bit of everything. We're going to review the 2024-2025 season, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to get into it all. From there, we're going to go into immediate changes the Steelers could make right now. We're going to look at some future changes that we like to see. And then finally, we're going to get into some way too early prospects to keep an eye on for the upcoming draft, and also go into potential free agent options that we're all looking at currently. A little too early to really get into all the free agency options because there's going to be so many cap casualties, some trades, surprise cuts. Based on analytics, we can really pinpoint who the Steelers will look at. We've been studying this a long time. Jake and I used to do this in college. We'd sit side by side and just be running mock drafts and looking at prospects. And once you get into free agency, you look at the Steelers' 30 official visits and who the Steelers really talk to at the Senior Bowl. And as these things progress, who we talk to at the Combine, we can pretty much narrow down like who the Steelers are looking at in the draft. And a valuable tool, Corey is our analytics guy. I'll let him talk a little bit more about what he's going to bring to this podcast.
Hey, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jake. Analytics are obviously a blossoming portion of sports management as a whole. You can look at how a player plays, stats that they put up, the stats that they don't put up. You can invent stats, dividing and subtracting and multiplying different stats and just create your own metrics that may or may not have value. So what I hope to do for Steelers Nation is really just use data to highlight and reveal anything that maybe isn't abundantly clear to the open eye. So we hope you find some insight and appreciate the spreadsheet aspect of the gridiron.
Yeah, I know we do.
Oh, yeah. All of us follow, the beat writers, the guys that are constantly tweeting and talking about the Steelers, the YouTubers that are bringing, their podcasts and their hot takes. This would be a good opportunity for us to kind of highlight those, the ones that we like, the ones that we don't like, the ones that we find humorous. Back when Sean and I were in college, we would follow Ed Bouchette. It was just entertaining, to say the least, following their transcripts and chats that were slightly arrogant. And sometimes they brought up good points during the Colbert era, but we came up with our own hot takes. And oftentimes we were correct, in hindsight, looking at different player evaluations and what we wanted to happen in free agency and what actually did happen in free agency. But kick it off.
All right. Yeah, that's a little background for the podcast, what to expect. So for this episode in particular, let's go straight to the 2024-2025 season. Let's talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Little list of good. When we talk about the good, it's the real good. The bad, a little longer list, and there's plenty of ugly to get into. It's been a few weeks since the season ended. Emotions are down a little bit, but I don't know how to describe it other than the fire's still there. The anger, still feel the playoff loss, and it just motivates us to really dive into where do we go from here.
I'm sure the players feel pretty relieved. Being that the season was so ugly towards the end of the season, and I think it's a historic collapse from any professional team. Football, outside of football, I mean, it was historically poor, and I'm sure the players want to move on from that and just put it past them.
Yeah, I don't know if it's apt to say that the team was glued together. I think that they were bungee corded and loosely taped, just kind of that pickup truck you see rumbling down the highway. It's got coolers and boards falling out the back end of it. That's how we made it to the postseason this year. And once we got there at the weigh station, you look in the back of the bed and there's really nothing much left.
No, just some Russell Wilson pump-up videos.
Mr. Unlimited.
Faith, family, fly, football.
So let's get into the good. And then what I want to do is for the good, the bad, the ugly, I want to break down offense, defense, and then some other components. For the good, let's talk about some good from the offense. First year under Arthur Smith, we saw some improvement. Well, the end of middle of the year, I mean, we could all say, "Oh my!" We revamped the quarterback room. We look at us. End of year, there was some good. The points per game's up. The red zone offense took a big leap. We had two rookie starters on the offensive line, wearing the Zach Frazier jersey right now. Mason McCormick, good year.
Should have had another rookie on the line too.
True. To be determined on Fontanonu. I'm a big fan. I'm excited to see what he can do, but we have good pieces. Jake, what other good topics on the offensive line? What do we get?
Zach Frazier is going to be a stud. He's going to be a Pro Bowler in the future, maybe even an All-Pro. I think you found your cornerstone of your offensive line. He is as advertised, coming into the draft. He translated so well to the NFL and was very competitive. I was a little concerned early in the season with his snaps to Justin Fields and the turnovers there. But with Russ, it seemed like we didn't have any issues. The passing attack at times was refreshing. We didn't see a lot of jet sweeps that we've seen previously from the Canada days. And at times, it just looked like an NFL offense. I remember watching that Bengals game being like, wow, I haven't felt like this watching a Steelers game since Ben Roethlisberger in 2020. So that was nice. They got Pat Freiermuth involved in several games, which was nice. And I think he disappears from game to game. They did well enough on third downs, not good enough, but better than maybe previous seasons. I have a statistic on third down, and the Steelers were actually the fifth best in the league for average yards per play in the passing attack.
On third down?
Yeah, on third down. They were fifth in the league in yards per attempt.
I would have never guessed that.
But when you look deeper into that data, their first and second down plays were so bad that they were behind the sticks every time. So they weren't converting a lot of these downs, even though they were picking up yards.
Especially late in the year. I feel like we were digging ourselves so many offensive holes. I don't know how many times we saw 3rd and 14, 3rd and 18, penalties, sacks, anything to get us behind the sticks was happening.
Teams really found out that Russ, he's lost a couple of steps, I think, and he was not as mobile as he needed to be. I thought that the blocking from the running backs, I thought that they were a little confused back there at times. We weren't picking up blitzes as they were coming. I thought Russ, he was changing to play a lot at the time too. And, with a young offensive line that's kind of just been really their first season together, I thought that kind of created more stress and it wasn't keeping it simple, stupid, really, which is kind of what I thought Arthur Smith's offense was designed to set up. It's not a complicated offense. It's meant to be executed with really attention to the details and the fundamentals. We might be kind of getting into the bad. If we want to talk about the good right now, I can talk about Justin Fields, I think, for a while. The season to me is kind of split up into two seasons. The beginning where he was on the field, and then the second half when Russ was in the game. You never know. There's always a possibility, I thought, for Fields to create something whenever we really didn't have it there, with the lack of depth at wide receiver, running backs kind of not really as explosive as some of the top tier teams in the league. Fields was asked, I think, to make a lot of plays, and he made the majority of the ones that he was asked to make.
The two losses that Fields was in, the Cowboys game and the Colts game, the defense really hurt them in both games. They let the opposing offense drive up and down the field in both of those games. Didn't give Fields a lot of opportunities. They were down 17-0 against the Colts before the Steelers put anything on the board. And there on defense, they did create a lot of turnovers. And that's probably the highlight of the defense is they produce turnovers. They produced a ton of turnovers against the Cowboys. The Cowboys would drive all the way down the field, and the Steelers would get the ball back for the offense. But it was still eating up so much clock and so much time. I don't know. I think Fields should be the starter next year. I think they should bring him back or at least compete against somebody else that they bring in.
We need to sign him.
He's had multiple offensive coordinators. He's had like a new offensive coordinator every single season in Chicago, and now he's finally got some consistency in Pittsburgh. Let's see what he can do.
I think the majority all three of us are in agreement that the direction we want to go right now is Justin Fields. We are not going to pick high enough in the draft, nor do we have the assets, nor do we really love this quarterback class, in my opinion, to trade up into that top 5 group. I would rather ride with Justin Fields next year. I think you guys are in agreement. I like what I saw. I agree. The 2 losses, and those losses happen, we didn't expect Justin Fields to go 10-0 out of the gate. He would have never seen the bench. One of the good points I have is, Russ's first couple games. Well, was it his first 3 or 4 hot out the gate? We're including the first Cincinnati game. That was a good. Russ looked good.
The receivers, I think, were really welcoming the balls that he was throwing. Fields to dart, very accurate. Russell's dropping it in there real soft. The impact of that kind of was reduced throughout the remainder of the season, just with lack of depth at the wide receiver position.
And that's one thing that as I'm scouting quarterbacks. So the college game right now has changed somewhere along the line over the last, I want to say 10 years. These major programs have taught their quarterbacks to get on a platform, and their deep balls, we are not seeing the trajectory, the Russell Wilson moonshot of a deep ball. That used to be a cornerstone for these guys, but rather teams are settling for these 20, 30-yard windows and throwing it on a rope because they see more man-to-man coverage. Receivers have more separation in college. I think Russell Wilson, honestly, throws a great deep ball. So when you get to the pros, and if there's one thing that I wanted Russell Wilson to work with Justin Fields going forward, it's the deep ball. I think Russ has great touch on it, and I think that quarterbacks in the last 10 years have lost a lot of the deep ball touch. I think like the last few years, you've really seen a transition of quarterbacks that like to throw that deep ball on a line.
And maybe it's because of the 2 high safeties. Teams are running that more now than ever before and taking away that deep ball and forcing the offense to pick up just small chunks all the way down the field.
Yeah, exactly. So their deep ball is a 20-yard window. You can't lob that thing. You got to throw that thing on the rope. So you're not seeing these guys, if they're throwing a deep shot, it's usually a deep post where we're throwing like 40 yards up. Again, also kind of throwing on a rope. So they lose some of that touch. We see that from Justin Fields going forward. Maybe that's something, hopefully that's something that Russ worked with him.
Yeah.
I think Russell protected the football really well. The Steelers, you guys, do you know how many interceptions we threw last year as a team?
Not a lot. I'm going to guess
6.
I was going to guess 8. 6
interceptions.
That's pretty great.
That's it. For a team that does not pass the ball very efficiently, we protected it.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's another Arthur Smith concept. But down the stretch, I think we're on agreement. Like we would have liked to have seen more shots because it turned into home run ball or check down. We stopped attacking the middle of the field. We stopped attacking some deep concepts. And it became a very predictable offense down the stretch. You're getting to the point where, we watch games together. We're on the phone, and you can almost call out the plays at certain points.
Yeah.
If you can do that from our couch, you got defensive analysts like with headsets, just watching with every resource available. They know what's coming. They figured Russell Wilson out.
Yeah, it's just very it's very flaccid. The offense is so conservative, especially in the first quarter. We're the worst first quarter team, and we're the worst first down team in the league, statistically.
It's hard to tell, what's the problem, what's the symptom of the problem. Is it we don't have the playmakers, and we'll talk about potential playmakers out there. But is it Roman Wilson, a body that should have been out there all season long, was not? Hopefully, he takes the entire season and off season to get in even better shape. We delay in going out and getting Mike Williams, probably not the free agent wide receiver anybody would have had at the very top of their list. He came in and was serviceable. There were a number of touchdown plays to Freiermuth. I can recall a few where he was wide open as well. So those balls easily could have gone his way. It is tough to come in and learn an offense. But yeah, I guess if we're still talking about positives, I was really impressed, pretty ecstatic really with Calvin Austin. I think going into the season, especially once we knew Roman wasn't going to start, I said to you all, look, if Calvin can make it 12 games without getting hurt, just given his frame and the amount of production that we're going to have to ask out of him, I think you call that a success. And he did more than that. He was out there. I don't know if he missed a game.
Took some big hits in that Cincinnati game.
He took a lot of big hits. He's tough.
Yeah.
Report came out today. sent you guys, they projected Calvin Austin 3-year, $30 million extension. I mean,
That's a bit rich, but
the Steelers did this once. If you guys remember, Antonio Brown was kind of the second guy. Was it
Mike Wallace?
Yeah, Mike Wallace was like, give me the big money, and we ended up going with Antonio Brown. That's not this case. Calvin Austin is not going to turn into Antonio Brown. But again, I mean, Calvin Austin, great year.
Yeah.
What is he worth? I mean, I would be pretty happy if the Steelers gave him a reasonable extension. I'd like to see this guy in black and gold for the next couple of years. 3 years, $30 million is a little bit rich for my blood, but I mean, if he gets a 3-year modest extension, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go north of 8, but what do I know? I mean, the Steelers paid Mike Williams $10 million last year to catch 13 passes.
True that. Let's go to defense. Defense, the good. Jake touched on it a little bit. First one I have, turnovers. But we only saw these turnovers towards the beginning of the year. They phased out quickly towards the end of the year.
The teams don't turn the ball over.
Good teams don't turn the ball over. We played the best 5 teams of our schedule at the end of the year, reasonably. So it makes sense. But at the same time, yes, okay, Beanie Bishop, we all remember that game. The defense as a whole, the corners, I just want to see the secondary maintain those numbers and like build on those. Like, I would love to see Minka. He didn't have an interception until late in the year. More turnovers from him. I have Deshaun Elliott. Love that signing. I love the year Deshaun Elliott had. To me, I mean, you take out Watt, Hayward had a great year, but Elliott, one of the most consistent defenders throughout the year. He has a liability in coverage.
Man,
at some points, he's not a very good man-to-man coverage guy. He's very good zone in the box, and he is maybe one of the best tacklers on this team.
Yeah, very competitive.
So I don't have the exact stats written down, but great year from Deshaun Elliott.
For me, I think from the offense to the defense is really kind of like a tale of two cities, where on the offensive side, I think we got the coordinator that we think can run the type of scheme that this team wants to run and can get the players that can run successfully, but didn't quite have the specialty players. On the defensive side, I think maybe it's towards the opposite. We might have been missing a player or two over there, but whenever you have these highest paid defense, veteran players, guys that I think everybody in Steeler Nation trusts, whenever you have communication issues between those guys, I mean, that to me is kind of unacceptable. What we touched on earlier through text, Terrell Austin is like one of the lowest paid defensive coordinators in the league. You don't go buy a Lamborghini and then take it to your friend down at the Jiffy Lube to change the oil. You want to take that thing to the dealership. You invested this much money in this defense, but we're not really getting the schemes to really bring the best out of those players. So obviously their defensive line needs filled, maybe a corner or a safety, but by and large, these guys are going to be here next year. I think that's good, but the coordinator, I know it's not the Steeler way, but I think we should probably move on there.
I would like to touch base on that point here in a second. I want to mention a couple more good things about the defense before we start really jumping into the super ugly stuff.
Like I said, there's a long list of ugly, and that is a major point on that.
It's easy for me to jump to, but go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, we're still kind of hurting over the end of the season and how it turned out. But the beginning of the season, the pass rush was there. Watt was taking over games. Watt looked like the Energizer Bunny. I'm pretty sure Justin Fields mentioned something in his first press conference about Watt being like, he's never seen a player take over a game like that in Atlanta.
He's playing like the best Steeler of all time at the beginning of the season.
Oh, yeah. Just the defense as a whole played so well early on. I remember them playing against Denver and holding that team to 10 or less points. They might have shut them out, maybe 3 points. But then after a while, the pass rush wasn't there, and they weren't even pressuring the quarterback. They weren't getting close. Watt didn't record a statistic in the last 200 snaps that he played in the season. Before that, Beanie Bishop was playing well. He gets taken out later in the season, and Cam Sutton starts getting more reps. Peyton Wilson played really well. It was refreshing to watch, a new linebacker come in and immediately make an impact. I wasn't so high on Patrick Queen towards the end of the season, but towards the beginning of the season, I thought he played well enough. I think that it might have just the other players covered up his poor play. I read about his play not being the greatest, but I thought he did well enough early in the season. We were holding teams, to a few points. With the exception of the Colts game, which that offensive coordinator of the Colts has the Steelers number. If you look at the last 4 games that he's coached against the Steelers, I mean, he dominates the Steelers. He has their number.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, when you talk about the good of the defense, a lot of it comes from the first 12, 13 games. I think outside of Cam Hayward, great year, career year, consistent throughout the year. I have Deshaun Elliott, consistent throughout the year. Minka, up and down year. Didn't produce a turnover till late. I had Watt, defensive MVP candidate. Hayward, great year. Elliott, consistent throughout, great signing. And
Jackson and Porter, I thought, were decent too. I mean, I thought that they
were
played
good.
well enough when they were healthy. You know, towards the end of the season, you had one on the field at a time because they were just battling injuries back and forth.
Yeah. Last good topic.
And Beanie Bishop, when it comes to undrafted free agents that get that much playing time, were some of the turnovers luck? Maybe he was in the right position. When you don't get that type of value, I feel like, from undrafted free agents that often. So he's got to be a really shining star, I think, from this season and hopefully going forward.
Yeah, he took some lumps. The Cowboys game, he got exposed a little bit. I want him to take this massive jump because I saw a lot of great things from Beanie Bishop. We saw some not so great things, but that happens. He's an undrafted rookie. Steelers rolled the dice. To me, I mean, an undrafted rookie starting in a slot corner role for his production, great year.
Yeah.
You're going to take some bumps there. I mean, it's not a first-round corner you're sticking out there. Even first-round corners struggle. Man coverage, their rookie year, it's a whole other game out there. One last good topic, though. Special teams. Great year from the special teams. Chris Boswell, great year.
MVP.
Yeah, MVP.
An unproblematic king.
Yeah, Chris Boswell. Danny Smith, career year. Love Danny Smith. I want to touch on this. I mean, the Steelers have had horrible punting for the last few years. They signed Johnson, the punter. He gets hurt. Awful.
Immediately.
Yeah, like the worst luck. Like Cornelius Waitman, way to come in. I thought he was very good. Better than we've had in years past.
Oh, yeah.
The return game, fine. Like, special teams made a lot of good plays. Props to Danny Smith. That was his best year.
Was it James Pierre that dropped that pass, that fake punt?
What a call.
Yeah, that would have been an incredible play.
Hindsight, 100%. That's a great call. He's wide open. The throw is there. That could go down with Lima Swede as one of the worst drops in Steelers history. All right, let's do it. Let's get into the bad, the coaching side of it, and let's start on the defensive side of the ball. Horrible, horrible schemes. My mind just instantly jumps to the Ravens game. We're getting called out on national broadcast. Like, our plan was for our outside linebackers to crash down on the running back every time. Like, we had so much success versus Lamar in the last 5-6 years, and we change it in a playoff game and have TJ Watt tackling a phantom running back and letting Lamar Jackson have, 70, 80 yards rushing in the first half off of 6-7 carries.
Yeah, it was a visible issue from the second drive on. I don't know why we didn't adjust there and really just ate our lunch.
Patrick Queen had probably his worst game as a pro in that playoff game. Watching the all-22 clips that Alex Kozora posted, he's just out of place. He's taken himself out of place. He's supposed to be the communicator of the defense, but the defensive line's not shifting to the strong. It's exposing the off-tackle runs. He was really, really bad. He didn't have much help up front. Loudermilk, who has been serviceable since he's been in the league, but he's not your Cam Hayward. He's not your Larry Ogunjobi. And Larry Ogunjobi wasn't himself this season, and I don't know if he ever will be up to the standard again. I know we'll get into potential cap casualties, but I think that he is one of them on my list.
He's on my list.
We did not have any penetration from the D-line. They looked exhausted. They looked old. A lot of them are old. Montrevious Adams has been on the team 3 or 4 seasons. He was brought on
4th season, I think.
He was brought on late one season where we were having issues in our run defense, and he played really well. And ever since, he's been on the team, but he's just kind of been that guy that they bring in against run-heavy teams. And maybe it's time to move on from him, bring on somebody else. I've said it before, a lot of teams, when they lose players, whether it be due to their contracts expiring or they're just cap casualties, they'll land on other teams and produce. You're not seeing that from recent years from Pittsburgh. And I don't think that Montrevious Adams, Larry Ogunjobi, and Isaiah Loudermilk are going to be big producers on any team. I don't know if they'll even make a roster again. They did not look competitive in the last 3 or 4 games. I think that's probably part of the reason why TJ Watt was unproductive late in the season. The Ravens game just really exposed the defense. Patrick Queen, I know, was sick, but man, he did not look like he even wanted to play.
Yeah, Patrick Queen, he came out, he's fighting the flu all week. Apparently, there was even in question whether or not he was going to be able to play. But to be that far out of position, hardly any of the defensive strategies, concepts, production, execution, none of it made sense. You just watching that Ravens game and you just think back, you touched on one of our best games, the Broncos game. At first we were like, oh, it's the Broncos, the rookie quarterback. Like, they're not supposed to be good. That's a playoff. Like, they had a very good year. So in hindsight, that was one of our best defensive games. If we could have taken that execution level and intensity and brought it to the Ravens game, I mean, we're looking at a different game, especially if you have the offense we showed in the second half throughout the game. I mean, shoulda, woulda, coulda, but
yeah, you can't let King Henry get started. Once he starts eating up yards, he's not going to stop.
yeah.
He's a momentum type of back. We have a lot to touch on this episode, so let's get moving to the offensive side of the ball. Corey, what do you think on offense? What was the ugly?
It comes a little bit from the front office for me. I just think we really dragged our feet with replacing the hole that Roman being out for the season was. The free agency market was not super thick. There weren't that many options. Ayuk, was that deal ever going to get done? Maybe, maybe not. But you're looking at putting out George Pickens, Calvin Austin, eventually Mike Williams. Those are not an NFL caliber receiving core, in my opinion. You couple that with not a lot of explosiveness, I feel like, from the running backs. Jalen Warren did show some good bursts. Najee even had some good runs, but I don't really feel like there was ever a game, maybe just one or two games, where either of them kind of had a complete effort for all four quarters. A bit of an issue. For me, Pat Fryermuth, with this big contract extension, he's taken up almost 5% of our salary dedicated to Pat Fryermuth. And he didn't have, when you look at the money, you say, okay, well, he came in 10th place in catches in terms of yardage, 65 receptions, basically 10 yards a catch at 653 yards and 7 touchdowns, the most touchdowns by a receiver on the team. He gets this contract in the offseason. I think we all kind of moaned about it at the time, but he had fewer yards this year than he did in 2022. I think that was his second year in the league. Kenny Pickett's first year. Ninth place in yards, eighth in receptions. I did this thing where I looked at the top 6 tight ends basically in terms of receptions and yardage. Bowers 112 receptions, McBride 111, Kelsey 97, Jonnu Smith 88, Kittle 78, and Ertz 66. And then when you look at the money that these guys, those are the players, the 6 players that had more receptions than Pat Fryermuth. Bowers is getting $4 million, obviously, on his rookie contract. McBride, similar, $5 million. Kelsey, $19 million. Jonnu Smith, $4 million. Kittle, $22 million. And Zach Ertz made a whopping $805,000 this year, along with some bonuses. Break those receptions down in terms of how much are these guys getting paid for one catch. At the top of the board, the Raiders are paying Bowers $35,000 per catch. McBride, $45,000 per catch. Kelsey's getting $195,000 per catch. You can imagine with the numbers how that goes. Pat Fryermuth is getting paid $196,000 per catch at 65 catches. I mean, there's a lot more value there in terms of we can double Pat's production by taking a guy like with the pedigree of Bowers, like McBride, Jonnu Smith. These guys are multiplying Fryermuth's production, and I know it's a lot more at the tight end position than just catching the ball. Maybe this isn't the draft. Obviously, there's the kid from Penn State,
Tyler Warren.
He's probably a top 15 pick. Is that a guy we're going to go after? I doubt it. But you can get a guy like Mason Taylor out of LSU. I look at him. He's got the exact same frame as Tyler Warren out of Penn State. I think he's projected to get drafted around, 86.
Yeah, third round.
We could take a reach there.
Well, it depends. We're going to know what positions the Steelers are going to look at in the draft as it gets closer. Once free agency comes and goes, we'll see what positions they target, whether or not they have the flexibility. Because, right now you're paying Fryermuth that money. Darnell Washington's on his rookie contract. And then,
Connor Hayward. Hey, Cole Pruitt. I
Yeah,
I
Michael
was
Pruitt.
happy with his production early in the season before he got hurt. He was a name that I didn't really know about. And here he's out there catching passes and getting first downs. And I mean, as the tight end 3-4, sharing it with Connor Hayward.
I think what Corey's point is that we gave Pat Fryermuth a big leap of faith. And I think the stats are okay. They're not great. The stats really don't match the tape, though. Fryermuth's not a great inline blocker.
19 yards. Not that bad.
It's not that bad. But
Yeah.
the inconsistencies.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you break it down game by game, you're looking at a 2 or 3 catch game. Like, he had a big game against Cincinnati. And then, like, towards the end of the year, he was scoring. I mean, I think some of the touchdowns came later in the year. I'm talking like 3 or 4 of them. But the tape also doesn't match. I mean, he's not a great inline blocker. He disappears often in the pass game. He's underutilized in the pass game. He's been underutilized. Matt Canada refused to, like, have him as a 1 or 2 option.
Yeah, you would have thought this year, I mean, why not? We just gave him this money. He has reason to step up, and we're short at pass catcher.
And Arthur Smith loves tight ends.
He should have been up in that 80. He should have been 85, 90 catches. I mean,
I agree.
This might boil down to Russell Wilson not fitting into this offense. You know, maybe second year, third year Russell Wilson, but Russell Wilson does not attack the middle of the field. He's not mobile. He's not very tall. We've seen this with Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett never threw over the middle of the field. Fryermuth wasn't really utilized then. I think the leap of faith was the coaching staff thinking, well, Kenny's out. We're going to attack the middle of the field now with this new offensive coordinator. We got a guy that can produce, and it didn't come to fruition.
One thing that Fryermuth also doesn't do that we had seen in the past, Heath Miller, greatest tight end in Steeler history. Ben was a great improviser, creating time, creating space. Heath Miller, like some of our receivers, like Antonio Brown, the Steelers receivers had to learn this. They had to learn to improvise. So when you see Ben escape the pocket, when you saw Justin Fields escape the pocket, I don't see that from really any of the receivers. Pickens will kind of do like a 180 and stick a hand up, and you don't see a lot of improv. You see the route, and I see Fryermuth fighting for it, but he's also not the most athletic. He's not incredibly quick, twitchy. Once he gets a safety on him, like man to man, and they're like bodied on him, they're with him. So it's hard for him to improvise. One thing I want to see is if we roll with Justin Fields into next year, the receiving core, I think Jaylen Warren's honestly the best at it. Improvising with the quarterback, finding a soft spot. Le'Veon Bell was great at it. Little check down, just finding a little soft spot. Ben would find him. Ben would find Heath Miller, Antonio Brown. If we're going to go to this RPO, improv offense, and Justin Fields has great escapability, it would be great to get back to that. Find the holes in the defense. It leads to so many first downs. It's so hard in this league.
and they don't know where you're going to go.
This league favors the offense so much. There's so many defensive holding calls. It's so hard for a defense to defend in the secondary for 5-6 seconds. It's easy for them to do it for a couple seconds, as long as that pass rush is getting there. But once that quarterback has the escapability, Bruce Arians' offense was great at this. All right, you have a route. Okay, it's not there. Break it off. Then you see you see Ben Flood right, and you see all the receivers break right, like at different levels.
Yeah.
The original play call's not there. The improv is. I think we've seen this offense stutter. It's stagnant. It's one route concept.
Mhm.
If it's not there, we saw so many throwaways, sacks. The offensive tackle production. I mean, we have the 2 leading offensive tackles and sacks given up this year. To have 1, inexcusable. To have 2 is criminal.
Yeah, I think what you guys brought up, along with the Pat Fryermuth thing, I think these are symptoms of a bigger issue. The improv, going to the second play, if the first read's not there, second read's not there, and you have to improv, break the pocket. You see Russell Wilson throwing it away. He led the league in throwaways, or at least he had like 26 throwaways, and he was like 25th in passing attempts. It was crazy, the stat.
He just took a sack in the Pro Bowl in flag football.
Yeah. He's not mobile enough, and he knows he's not mobile, and he's just trying to live to see another down.
Understandable.
I think the Pat Fryermuth thing, touching on it, I think it's part of his fault. I think if he was schemed as the number 1 read over the middle, and we had a quarterback that liked to throw over the middle, he would get more catches. The offensive line play was horrendous on the outside. I mean, you had 2 rookies on the inside trying to keep it together. You had Sam Awalu that came back from injury. He wasn't 100%. You never are 100% coming back from an injury like that. You have your first-round tackle not playing. Dan Moore kind of regressed this year, and Broderick Jones regressed the most. I think that was the saddest part of the offense is Broderick Jones. You go and invest a first-round pick and a tackle.
Trading up.
Yeah, you had some promising snaps from him in 2023, and he showed that competitiveness and that tenacity and the athleticism that you want in a tackle. And this year, it was just brain fart after misassignment, after let your guy run you back into the quarterback. You don't even anchor down at all. I mean, you're on skates as soon as the ball snaps. I don't understand it. And then you see the one play where Broderick Jones and Dan Moore both pull at the same time. Like, what the heck is happening? And you mentioned it, Corey, earlier with Russell Wilson changing the plays at the line of scrimmage. And Ben Roethlisberger brought that up on his podcast when he was talking about, his recap of the 2024 season. And maybe that is why the offensive line had issues in pass pro and had issues running the ball.
A new coordinator, and Russ is a guy, veteran. He's been around the block. He has a way that he likes to do things. And whenever he's a bit older, we've got a younger offensive line, younger receiving core. I just don't know if they were in the same gear, running the same speed.
I think this is the perfect point to get into the immediate changes that we can make. So we've kind of touched on end of the year. I mean, the Mike Tomlin collapse. The question was, okay, how much is enough? Like, how many times can you be one and done or miss the playoffs? How many times can you say, well, it's not a losing season, chalk it up as a win, before you say, we need to move in a new direction? The Steelers, traditional in their ways, other teams more aggressive based on the reports. We can all assume now Mike Tomlin back next year. The question comes in, and we've seen reports from Steelers beat writers, whether that's at the Post, guys that have a little bit more insight and availability into the locker room. I mean, Arthur Smith, I think, deserves a second year. I think he showed enough in his first year as offensive coordinator to come back. Terrell Austin, we're in year 3. We've just done too many internal hires. So the immediate changes we could make, it doesn't look like we will be changing coordinators. We've all talked. I think it's time to go in a new direction. But also, how much say does Mike Tomlin have in the defensive film room? How much of it is his scheme versus Terrell Austin? We can get mad at Terrell Austin because he calls the defensive signals, but how much does he call? How much does Mike Tomlin call? Mike Tomlin will never throw Terrell Austin under the bus, but he also won't take the responsibility himself. So coaching staff changes. It can be a small, Pat Meyer on the offensive line. You can say what you want. To me, like Frazier and McCormick had the raw skills to come in. It takes a little bit of coaching to get them up to speed. Frazier was a plug and play center. You can't credit that. The offensive tackle decline, you can credit that. Inability to pick up different stunts down the stretch. To me, offensive line needs to go in a new direction. I mean, we revamped the offensive coaching staff last year outside of Faulkner and Meyer, and then we kept a few guys, not demoted, but change of position within the offensive coaching staff. I would have loved to have gone into this year and done the same thing. Started from scratch, brought in some younger, different perspective coaches. I mean, we have the smallest coaching staff. We have the least paid coaching staff. Mike Tomlin has a horrible coaching tree. At what point do you Andy Reid has coordinators all the time getting promoted. Dan Campbell has 2 coordinators get head coaching jobs this year. Tomlin hasn't had anybody. Bruce Arians got kind of fired in Pittsburgh and then locked into a job in Tampa Bay. To me, we really need to revamp the defensive coaching staff as well as the offensive line coaching staff. And Pat Meyer was a coach we brought in from Carolina who didn't renew his contract, and they had a historically bad offensive line, and it's translated here. What makes you think it's going to work better here? It hasn't, but he's got 1 year left on his contract, and you guys know the Steeler way. Ride out their contract and just don't renew.
I think the Pat Meyer hire was based on the zone running attack that Carolina likes to run and likes to utilize. And I don't know how long that Pat Meyer was there, but Carolina has had a good rushing attack given their other offensive inefficiencies, the quarterback position and the passing.
Yeah.
I don't think you bring back Najee Harris. Really liked him coming out of college, and he impressed me a lot his rookie season, which I think was his best year. He was the bright spot on the offense when we went 11-0 with Ben Roethlisberger, but he does not fit the zone scheme. The toss plays, the outside zones we'd run him, it did not make sense to me why Warren wasn't in the game running those plays. Najee Harris doesn't have the hip flexibility. He doesn't have the ability to stick his foot in the ground and cut up field and explode through holes. I know Warren was injured early in the season season, and that's why we didn't get the season that we typically get out of Warren. I don't think you bring Najee back. I think he'll find success somewhere that runs a more power scheme. He'll be in the league for a few more years, but you don't bring him back. You don't bring Jefferson back. Van Jefferson on offense was basically overutilized. I don't know why they kept giving him targets and trying to scheme him open. He didn't block that great. It didn't make sense to me. It was like Allen Robinson all over again. You bring in a guy that doesn't fit the scheme at all. You should try to scheme plays up in the Arthur Smith offense to this guy. I think there's some personnel changes that need to happen on offense and need to happen fast. I don't think you bring Dan Moore back unless he takes a cap-friendly deal. I don't know. If you think that he can beat out Broderick Jones at left tackle, then maybe you bring him back. But I would really like to see them bring someone else in and compete with Broderick at the left tackle position. That's going to be your hole in the offensive line this upcoming year, and maybe even left guard if they decide to part ways with Semuwalu. I think your right side is solidified with Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier, and Troy. You could even bring back James Daniels on a cheap deal because he missed the entire season and he was going to get paid. He was going to get paid a lot before the season.
Yeah.
But after missing, a whole season, players are never the same. So I think you can bring him back and he would be a good depth piece. Maybe even start over Mason McCormick and you have him be the swing guard back and forth. But Pat Meyer would be my one coaching change on the offense. It's hard to say who else I wouldn't bring back. Certain guys gel with certain players, and I don't know what it's like in that locker room. If they're going to switch to a more zone run scheme, they need to get a zone running back and also get maybe a tackle that is familiar with the zone running scheme. Just because you're strong and fast, put on good tape on one scheme doesn't make you a perfect fit. And I think that's what you've seen out of Najee Harris this year.
Yeah, I agree. I would bring in another tackle to solidify the offensive tackle position. However, the Steelers see it as we've invested 2 first-round picks in the offensive tackle position in the last 3 years. I mean, safe to say, next year, Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu probably penciled in as starters. But again, I think there needs to be a solid plan in play to have a guy because, we don't know what we have in Fautanu. We've seen a little bit, very little. And Broderick Jones, inconsistencies, second in the league only to Dan Moore and sacks given up. If the wheels fall off, you have to have a backup plan. We didn't have one at wide receiver. We'll get into some guys, but circle back. A name I'm keeping my eye on, Kelvin Beachum, cheap option, played last year for $4 or $5 million, has really done well with the Cardinals. He's old, going to be 35, I believe. Been there, done that, played left tackle, played right tackle, perfect swing tackle, and maybe can be that veteran presence. You're relying on Dan Moore, who's just finished out his rookie deal, to be a veteran presence for Troy and Broderick. Maybe bringing in a guy like Kelvin Beachum, maybe that'd be more helpful than even a new offensive line coach. Just having a veteran that can show you discrepancies in tape, can show you technique, footwork. What do I know? Could pay off, though.
At this point in his career, I don't know if he's a scheme fit for the zone running attack, but if they go a different direction other than Fields as the quarterback, I wouldn't mind seeing Beachum come in.
But I'm also drafting one.
You're also drafting one?
Yeah.
Are we going to get into our free agents that we like?
Yeah, I think we all agree we need to revamp the wide receiver room, almost a complete overhaul. I'll let Corey touch, and then I have one other thing, and then, we have prospects to keep our eye on, and we'll get into the free agent predictions.
Okay.
Names to keep our eye on.
I don't have too much, really. I think definitely bringing in some type of veteran tackle that has played with maybe a couple different proficient quarterbacks. That type of guy is going to be able to bring something to the table. I think even if they're not 100% there physically, as long as you're not getting beat every single snap, that's pretty much going to be better than what we have right now. Plus the mental acuity that a veteran tackle is going to be able to bring to the group. A young group, probably going to get even younger this off season. It's really almost necessary, I think. So I agree with you there. And then we don't need Van Jefferson, we don't need Mike Williams. So
One name, the Scarecrow, Veronic. He was a little bit of a bright spot to me. Somebody that I'm circling to bring back on that 1-year deal. He made some really great special teams plays. He reminds me of longtime Steeler Miles Boykin. That is the wide receiver 5'6" fringe guy. That's the production you want, right? Big special teams plays. He had a fumble recovery. I think he had a forced fumble down the stretch. He had a touchdown this year. 15, 20 catches. That is outliving your contract to me. As much as I'm revamping the wide receiver room, that's a guy I'm circling in that 6th spot. I'd like to see him back. Again, we touched on the long-term offensive tackle pair. who's going to be there. We do have to get younger. The offensive line shift has been great. We have a young receiving core. Defensively, we've got to start getting younger. Linebacker, we've done that, revamping a little bit. Defensive line is the biggest area I'm talking about that. But secondary, how long can you ride with a James Pierre? He's serviceable. He's never going to come in and do great. How soon until you take a leap of faith in a mid-round draft pick, like invest in the secondary? The NFL favors the offense so much anymore with penalties. I mean, we see it every year. Everybody's talking about the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes gets calls. Roughing the passer has become almost a joke. Defensive holding, defensive pass interference, hands to the face. There's so many defensive-based penalties that are just called. Offense, you just have your typical holdings. The NFL favors offensive production, right?
Yeah, the Lions fly.
Yeah. Make the shift. Like, we have the highest paid defense. It's not working. We need to shift some money allotment to the offensive side of the football. I think this is the offseason to start it. A lot of money tied into the defense, and you're going to see as guys phase out of these bigger contracts. I think how much? $45 million tied up to our outside linebackers. What's Minka making next year? Is it 21?
I think it's like over 22 million.
Patrick Queen, lucrative deal, but tying 13 million to him, right?
More than that.
Cam Hayward, significant money. I mean, there's so much money tied up on the defensive side of the football.
And you know what offenses do? Offenses pick on players.
Yeah.
Offenses pick on the Beanie Bishops that are a rookie, undrafted guy that come in and are playing nickel. They pick on James Pierre that comes in for Dante Jackson while he's injured. They pick on Deshaun Elliott when he's man covered on somebody. These offenses know who the weak link is. I remember watching William Gay early in his career play slot cornerback and just get picked on every single game. And it made me, I was so tired. I was not a Willie Gay fan. That's what offenses do. They're basically neutralizing your best players and all the money that you have tied up into this guy like TJ Watt, that $30 million player that you're sending off the edge. He's just getting chipped by a $2 million running back and a rookie right tackle, and they're taking you out. So all that money that you've invested in your defense, the offense has invested a couple players maybe, but they've not invested any money to stop him. They're taking their $30 million receiver and they're passing it to him. They're taking their $30 million quarterback and he's touching the ball every play. You have to invest in the offensive side of the ball, and I'm glad you pointed that out. I do think that there's some guys in free agency that we can solidify some parts. Drafting defensive players, I don't know why it feels like such a risk sometimes. Maybe it's because of the recent struggles in getting guys like Devin Bush and Jarvis Jones and far back as Ziggy Hood, Artie Burns, Terrell Edmonds. You invest those high draft picks in these defenders that don't turn out. Kevin Colbert's been doing it for the past 15 years. Now we got Cont. Play money ball on defense, invest some high draft picks, and maybe some high dollars in a superstar on offense.
Yeah, the 6 highest paid players on the team are all defensive players. Minka is at 22 million, 13 million guaranteed. But we're talking about maybe finding something else to do with Patrick Queen. Preston Smith, same thing. Ogunjobi, same thing. Pat Freiermuth is the only offensive player paid higher.
Is he the only offensive player in the top 10?
Samalu is up there as well.
Samalu, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. James Daniels, I think, last year was paid well.
Fields is going to get paid, but Chris Boswell, there are 2 offensive players on our team that are getting paid more than Chris Boswell, the kicker.
Which is great if you invested all of your draft stock into the offense.
When we kind of have, but they just have,
some, not enough.
Injuries.
Every team has weaknesses.
Let's talk about how we're going to fill these holes.
I liked the 2 tackles out of Baltimore that play in the AFC North. They've played the Myles Garretts. They've played the Trey Hendricksons. They've played the TJ Watts and the Alex Highsmiths. You got Ronnie Staley and you got Patrick McCarry. The Ravens aren't signing both of them.
No.
One of them is going to be hitting free agency. Why not bring them to your arch rival, Pittsburgh, and have them run the ball, have this running scheme that you want to incorporate? They found success. They also have a running quarterback. Fields is not Lamar Jackson. He may never be Lamar Jackson. I hope he is. These tackles have played with a mobile quarterback that can improvise, that runs around the pocket. It makes it more challenging on the offensive line to stay in front of their guy when you have a quarterback that's back there running around. That's why I like both of them. Patrick is 27. Ronnie is 30. I think Patrick is going to get somewhere between 6.5 million and I know this is a wide gap, but 12 million per season because of his age.
Yeah.
I think he would be a really good tackle for us, and he could solidify our line or at least compete with Broderick Jones. And then Ronnie Staley he's 30 years old, but you see Trent Williams producing at 35 years old, 36 years old. So I think he would be a really good option for us as well. And then if he has to play, does Ronnie Staley play right tackle?
Left tackle.
He plays left tackle? Perfect. So those are my two guys that I'm really looking at to bring in. The Ravens did it to us a few years ago, and they took Villanueva from us.
Mm-hmm.
The North is different. The AFC North is different from other divisions.
Keeping it in the family.
Part of the reason why our tackles are giving up so many sacks is because of the competition within the North, and these tackles see it.
Listen, Ronnie Stanley is on my short. Like, if I broke it down into the dream list, and then there's the, okay, we could do this, and then there's the realistic. And when we get more into the free agent, like, this is just way too early talk about the free agent predictions. But right now, Ronnie Stanley's in my dream scenario list. Plug and play, left tackle, 30 years old, little bit of an injury history, but the guy's been all pro since he came into the league almost. He would just be the perfect guy who's familiar. Again, you touched on it. Familiar with a mobile quarterback that escapes the pocket, improvises, works on the run. And again, the North keeps it in the North. Mike Hilton with the Cincinnati, Alejandro, we steal Patrick Queen. It happens. It's not like other divisions. I would love to have Ronnie Stanley.
This is like the only division where they drive to the games. They don't have to fly. I mean, the Steelers don't have to travel very far. I think these families don't want to move.
Yeah.
And Ronnie Stanley's family might not have to move if he comes and plays in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. Corey, give us somebody you're looking at in free agency.
Offensively, I do agree with you guys. I don't know if we bring Najee back. I'm looking to replace him. I know we want to draft somebody, maybe take somebody kind of high. We'll get into it. But I think a suitable guy to have on the roster that might fit what we're trying to do well is Javonte Williams from Denver. He's 2 years younger than Najee. He's going to be cheaper than Najee. I don't think he's lost a step. I think he runs pretty hard, and he can get up the seam, hit the hole, and I think he's still got the hips to shake and bake a little bit. We could pay him $6-7 million. He's been getting 2.5. I think that would end up being cheaper than Najee and maybe even a better back, especially for our system. That's who I've got free agent wise. Offensively, defensively, I've got a couple more guys.
Javonte Williams played for North Carolina, and he was drafted same draft that Najee was, right?
Yeah, second round guy. Good combine. He's had some injuries. I think he had an ACL tear a couple years ago. Great bounce back this year, though. He's a guy, I agree, who should have some value. The running back market, though, has kind of been unpredictable. Obviously, when a guy like Saquon hits the market, the Eagles swooped in, paid him. Other guys, they don't get re-signed. The team that they're coming off of kind of wants to lowball them. So we've seen this resurgence. Like, I think DeAndre Swift's only got, $5 million Chicago. You could see us getting a steal. Javonte Williams, that's a guy I'm going to keep on my list as well.
He reminds me of the other North Carolina running back that's entering the draft, Hampton.
Do you like Hampton out of North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, I like him in the second round, and that's kind of where I like Javonte when he came into the league. I was hoping that we would have drafted Javonte over Najee Harris just because I liked his tape better. I remember talking to you about it. I was really high on Javonte, and I got to watch him play against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. We shut Denver down that day, but Javonte is very explosive.
I agree. I think that's one that we're going to keep on the short list to look out for. Offensively, I have a guy. I know everybody's been talking about T. Higgins, where he's going to end up. In likelihood, the Bengals are going to find a way to keep him, whether that's the transition tag, whatever it's going to be. The guy in my top three, Chris Godwin, receiver out of Tampa Bay. Loved Chris Godwin coming out of college. I know, Jake, you did too. And since he's been there, I mean, the ultimate pro, the great slot receiver. He gets open, he scores touchdowns, he blocks well, he does everything well. He is going to be 29 years old at the end of this month. And that's a guy that, for what we'd be willing to pay, we need a veteran presence in that receiver room.
Locker room guy. Yeah. Who is that? Who is it supposed to be? It's not going to be guys you bring in mid-season. Yeah.
Exactly. We need that veteran leader in that receiving room. Chris Godwin. There's going to be a lot of teams that are calling about Chris Godwin. And the Steelers' inconsistencies in the passing attack might not be as appealing to him. But if we can match the money, regardless of how we feel, players want to play for Mike Tomlin. He's a great recruiter, and he's valued. When you look at the Steelers report card, like the facilities, the ownership, I mean, the Steelers got abused in that report card by the players. But when it talked about head coach, I believe it was Dan Campbell, Andy Reid, and then Mike Tomlin as the highest graded head coaches by their own players. Mike Tomlin does have a way of recruiting players. Chris Godwin, he's coming off a tib-fib injury. That's not a long-term concern. That's a broken bone. That's no structural damage, no ligament damage. Yes, he was out for the year, but in 7 games this year, 50 catches, 576 yards, 5 touchdowns in just 7 games. I mean,
That's crazy.
That's third on the team in receptions, third or fourth on the team in yards, and that would be second on the team in touchdowns in 7 games.
It's remarkable.
Yeah, great year from Tampa Bay.
Do you know what his value's looking like right now?
So it's hard to tell coming off injury, but he's still 29 years old, soon to be. Coming off the injury, kind of a question mark.
Mike Williams was coming off an injury with the Chargers, and the Jets gave him that contract.
Yeah, just 1 year, $10 million.
I think Godwin's going to get more than that. I think Godwin's not going to get double it.
It's like at 15.
Yeah, he's going to be around that. That 15 seems around what he's going to get, and it might just be a $1 to $2 million try-it deal if he leaves Tampa Bay. But we have the cap for it.
I agree. I think he's the perfect fit, veteran leader, and
He's a guy that you kind of literally need, in the locker room.
yeah, even if we get into a bidding war, Christian Kirk signed for what, $20 million? Like, he's had an okay couple years in Jacksonville, but free agency.
The wide receiver market's not great. You're not going to get. I don't think we think.
No, so we might get into a little bit of a bidding war.
Yeah.
Unless he wants to go play for like Oakland.
You just it's something you have to bite the bullet and do, I think.
I agree. I'm willing to overpay a little bit for Chris Godwin.
Especially on a 1-year deal. 1 year, and then you got the cap freed up afterwards if you don't want him back. Kind of like the whole Preston Smith, Mike Williams situation where they're going to cut Preston Smith. They're not paying Preston Smith $13 million.
$13.4 million.
Take that money and give it to Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
I wanted Chris Godwin over Juju. I remember talking to you about this, John.
Yeah.
I really liked him coming out of college. And I was happy with Juju, especially seeing what he produced in his first few seasons. But Godwin's had a career now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, both were super young coming out of college. I believe Juju's going to be 28. Godwin's just a year older. He'll be 29 at the end of the month. 6'1", 210 pounds. Ideal size. Great blocker. I think he fits really well into Arthur Smith's 3-man schemes, tight end, and then 2 levels of receiver. He's that guy that can get that second level and find the open gaps.
He's going to garner respect, too. We haven't had another guy that's getting that respect out there. And to take, that's going to open up Pat.
It's going to open up George Pickens.
It open up Pat. It's going to Pickens.
Yeah,
exactly.
If we don't get rid of Pickens, but yeah, I agree.
Another option, more expensive. As we were filming this, Cooper Kupp says that the Rams impendingly are going to trade him. I looked at the cap situation before we jumped on here. It's a high $20 million contract, like 27, 28. A lot of dead money. So to trade for him, you're paying him 2 years left on the contract. Next year, I think the cap hit jumps closer to 30. Cooper Kupp, he's going to be 33 years old. Godwin, 4 years younger. Less production over the course of his career, more production, honestly, in the sample last year than Kupp did down the stretch. Kupp was having 1-2 catch games.
The Rams are not going to get an offer like a second-round pick or a first-round pick. They're going to have to eat some of that cap if they're going to want any draft capital or any player.
Probably half of it, honestly.
Yeah, they're going to have to eat some of it because there's no way a team's going to come in and pay a 33-year-old receiver that kind of money.
No.
I just don't see it.
So if we strike out with Chris Godwin,
there could be something there.
We'll touch on it in a later episode. There could be something there if they're willing to retain and not expect a huge draft pick in return. All right.
I got one for you guys. I talked about Dre Greenlaw. We were coming up with this list because I think that he's just going to be a stud. He's coming off an injury. He's going to command a huge contract, right? But there's somebody else that jumped off the page, EJ Speed from Indianapolis. Absolutely killed us last year when we played them. And Pittsburgh always leans towards these players that have a lot of success against them and kind of cause havoc against them, whether it be offense or defense. EJ Speed is my guy. He's 29 years old. So he's not going to command that $20 million that Dre Greenlaw is going to command. Dre Greenlaw is going to get the same contract, if not better, than what Patrick Queen got, especially with how dry the middle linebacker market is. It's hard to find that guy that is your communicator, the green dot. I think EJ Speed would be a great pair alongside Wilson. Potentially trading Patrick Queen might not be a bad thing. That might be an opportunity for us. We can't really cut him because of the dead money situation, but we could potentially trade him and have some cap savings.
I agree. The only way he leaves Pittsburgh would be a trade.
We could even potentially eat some of that. He's got a 7.7 million cap hit. I wouldn't mind covering two, maybe three of that.
It's still a reasonable cap hit, but I think that number is going to jump next year. I think it's a backloaded. You got a lot of money up front, but I think that cap hit jumps significantly next year.
No, it's 17. The dead is 7.7. I'm sorry.
Oh,
But yeah,
okay.
it's 17.7.
I think we get EJ Speed for 10 million. Over the cap has him at 6.5 valuation. They're not always accurate. I think conservatively we can get him under 10, and he could be that guy, that dog, like a Landon Roberts, but has legs to cover. And he's a tall guy.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure EJ's like 6'2 or 6'4.
I was going to say 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, I mean, he's a tall guy.
That's a name I'm going to have to do more homework on. He was not on my short list, but I agree. He killed the Steelers this year. I mean,
he hit Warren so hard one play. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I remember. I have a guy. This is a little bit of a question mark. Sante Samuel Jr., draft crush of mine from a few years ago, 25 years old, 5'10", 180 pounds, significant shoulder injury this year. I had to read all about this. He played in 4 games this year. They shut him down. They put him on IR. They hoped it was short term. I have to look more. There's not a lot of medical reports. I don't know if he had surgery on it. Basically, it was a stinger, a long-term stinger. He kept feeling stinger symptoms with any pressure to the shoulder. I hope that he had a surgery to correct this. If that was possible, I hope he's able to recover from this and hit free agency totally healthy. If you're the Steelers, you got to check a lot of medical boxes. But this is a guy, he had the pedigree. He went the second round. He's been a consistent to above consistent pro. He averages about 2 INTs a year. He's a really good tackler. He's a scheme fit for us. I think he's a guy that the Steelers met with multiple times throughout the draft process. I mean, Tomlin's raved about him before. He's a guy that's on my short list if he checks out medically. If not, obviously not. But I could see Asante Samuel Jr. being a guy that signs modest. I mean, when you're talking starting corners, I think Dante Jackson's going to hit free agency. If we bring him back, how much are we going to pay him? I'd be willing to pay Asante Samuel healthy a little bit more than that. But you're still looking somewhere in the ballpark of 12, 14 million.
I think coming off the injury, I mean, you're looking more like 7 or 8.
I agree. Coming off the injury, we're going to get better value.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about healthy corner. Like, what is Dante Jackson's projected signing?
He'll probably make what he made last year. He'll probably get somewhere between 8 and 9 million a season.
You just know how free agency is. Like, teams that are desperate overpay. It kills me sometimes watching NFL.com. You see, as free agency hits, the contracts agreed upon, and you're like, there's no way. I remember watching Christian Kirk get $20 million in a dried up receiver market.
But what did the Browns sign that guy from Denver last year? That was an insane contract. The Alabama kid. He was a first-round pick. I mean, we can't even remember his name.
Guys get stupid contracts in free agency.
I agree. I think that with Asante Samuel, you can kick him inside in sub packages, and I would like the Steelers to experiment with that. You got Corey Trice that's built like Joey Porter and could play on the outside. You've been asking your safety or your tweener guy. I think Bishop's more of a tweener guy. I don't think he's a true nickel cornerback, and I don't think he's a true safety. I think he's like in between. You're asking them to play that slot cornerback, and you really need a legitimate slot. I'm so jealous of Baltimore and how they have Washington playing the slot.
Mm-hmm.
He is such a good cornerback. They did have Kyle Hamilton playing there at the beginning of the season. It's not as effective. You've seen it. They were one of the worst passing defenses in the league when you have a safety playing that role. And then they kicked him back and they brought in Washington to play the slot. He just shuts people down. And he had that great hit on Russell Wilson when Russell fumbled it. That just solidified my opinion of Russell Wilson. But yeah, I would like for them to bring in a cornerback like that can play slot and maybe kick Jackson or Trice outside in those sub packages. And then when we go in our base 3-4, Samuel would play that outside corner.
But again, that's what happens when you invest in the secondary consistently, not just,
rearrange things.
Our secondary's hurting. We need to really draft a corner or two. Every year, Baltimore and Philly, who I feel like have some of the 2 best secondaries, Philly's constantly doing with their defense. Like, they invest money in the offense, they get guys, and then on defense, they draft kids from Georgia. But Baltimore, every year, somewhere in the first few rounds, they find diamond in the rough. They invest. They spend a first-round pick on Kyle Hamilton, and they get guys like, Humphrey, and there's been a lot of guys that they've invested high.
Wiggins last year.
Wiggins, exactly. They're constantly investing in their secondary. In this current NFL state, you need to invest in your offense, which the Ravens have done. They're doing what the Steelers need to do. They had a good defense, so they paid a lot of money. They shifted that once they realized Lamar was their franchise guy. What they do? They draft Dave Flowers. They've invested some in the wide receiver position. They draft tight ends. They invest in their O-line. They go out and sign Derrick Henry. They're investing in their O-line, and then they're drafting well on defense. They're not overpaying guys. They shed a lot of defensive salary cap over the last 4 years, and they've transitioned to moving that to the offensive side of the football. And I think that's why you see them go deeper in the playoffs than us. The NFL favors offenses. So where do you need to invest? You need to invest in skilled players on the offense. You need a good offensive line to win in this league. Obviously, a quarterback position. Then on defense, you're secondary. Because without a good secondary, just think the AFC. If you made the playoffs in the AFC, you're facing Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. You're facing Lamar Jackson.
Joe Burrow.
The list goes on and on. You have the potential. If you throw a weak secondary out there, you're going to get torched.
Yeah, they're just going to pick you apart. If Lamar Jackson can pick you apart with his arm and pick on like Elliott in coverage, it's demoralizing. Baltimore does a really great job of drafting every single year. They do a great job of developing. I feel like they have a pool of players that they're developing for the next level every single season. They're able to then pay free agents to come in and produce. The Steelers have been playing catch up for a long time, and they've had these glaring holes, and they haven't had a guy to just step up into that role. It's not like next man up like it used to be with Pittsburgh. Next man up, it's James Harrison coming in for Joey Porter. Next man up, Willie Gay coming in for Ike Taylor. Next man up, it's TJ Watt coming in for James Harrison. You don't have that anymore.
No.
You're holding on to players for too long. They're eating your cap on the defensive side of the ball, and we've hit the nail on the head. Defense is no longer winning games for teams. It's the offensive side of the ball where the game is favoring them. We have an old defensive line that's really holding us back. We've talked about the secondary, the nickel position. We've talked about the middle linebacker and Patrick Queen not really playing to his contract. But on defense, it's really the defensive line. It's the trenches. I highlighted Jaron Reed to come in and replace Larry Ogunjobi. He's 33 years old, but he's been more productive than Larry O over the last few years. He plays in a really great defense for Seattle. He rushes after the quarterback. He has more pressures. He has more sacks. He has more tackles per loss. I just think that he would be a good fit in Pittsburgh as that three technique defensive end. I don't think that he would necessarily break the bank because of his age. Let Larry go. Bring Jaron Reed in. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you need to invest in the tackle position. And we have to hit on draft picks.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's just sort of look at where we're at holistically with the cap. Going into next year, we're at last place with dead cap, only $45,000. So really sitting the prettiest there. Straight space, $43 million. We talk about maybe letting Preston Smith go, no dead cap. Larry Ogunjobi, a couple million, I think $3 million. So that's $13 million saved, and then $7 million saved with Preston Smith and Ogunjobi. We could get into Holcomb.
Yeah.
So you take that 43, you add 20 with Preston Smith and Ogunjobi.
Holcomb's like 7.6.
No, Holcomb's, you would save $6 million, but he has $1.6 million in dead cap.
So that's 26, 25, we'll say, plus the 43 that we have available right now.
Cordell Patterson is another $2 million that you would save, roughly.
We'll say 27.
The cap this year is projected somewhere between 265 and 275 billion. Last year is at 255.
Right. So it's going to go up an extra 10 to 20.
10 to 20.
So we're talking about working with $70 million, $65 million, somewhere in that range of cap space.
With minimal work.
We obviously have to pay Fields if that's the direction we're going, maybe, 15, we'll say. So at the end of the day, we're talking about anywhere from 65, 60, $70 million that we have to work with.
And we have the con artist who works miracles.
Yeah, and we've got Con doubling that amount of money somehow.
How many years, Jake, did we go with like $10 million in cap space into free agency?
Yeah, and then it takes $10 million to sign your draft class. So it's like,
Yeah.
what are we going to do? We have all these holes. And Kevin Colbert would like restructure 6 deals, and then we'd go sign our big free agent. What was the first big free agent that you remember? I think it was Joe Hayden.
Mike Mitchell.
Mike Mitchell?
Mike Mitchell.
Oh, yeah, Mike Mitchell.
Who came first, Mike Mitchell?
Mike Mitchell came first. Man, don't get me started on Mike Mitchell. Man.
I had to do it to you. Jake's least favorite Steeler of all time.
You couldn't watch Steelers game. Yeah, if you're watching this, Mike Mitchell, it's really annoying to watch you get burnt every single game and then get up and cheer after you made a big hit after the receiver got a first down on 3rd and 15. That really aggravated me.
I had to bring it up. I had to throw it in there the first episode. Yeah.
We've got these, we'll say 65 million, 60 million maybe after Fields is said and done. Quite a lot of money to work with in free agency, minus our draft signings, 55, 50 million, somewhere around there. I mean, it is quite a lot. Defensively, and this is kind of in the same vein as what you were speaking about with the corners earlier, Jake, but I think I'm going to flip it the other way. Like, we could go get a guy like Byron Murphy, pretty much as good as it gets. Rasul Douglas is out there as well, but Byron, he's a little bit younger. I think he's maybe even better than Rasul Douglas. Byron Murphy, he's projected to get around $20 million. It's not lost on me. We've been talking about how overpaid our defense is. Maybe it's just overpaid in the wrong places. We've got some money attached to guys that have lost a step. Byron Murphy has not lost a step. He's going to be the guy that I think could bring the secondary together and just lock them in. That's something I could see maybe being worthwhile. The other free agent defensively that I had, because I really want to attack offense in the draft, I think, is where you can be a little bit more certain that guys are worth the money and the chance that you're taking on them up high in those rounds. And then, so defensive tackle, Javon Kinlaw out of the Jets, he's one of the youngest defensive tackles that are in free agency. He's currently getting around $4 million. They've got him projected to get around $7 million. We need that position so bad, and he is really at the top of his position class in free agency. We could even go up to 8 or 9 there, and I think that in free agency, spend $20 million on Byron Murphy, 8 or 9 on Javon Kinlaw. Well, we still have $30 million left over at least. Potentially, maybe even more in free agency that we can throw at the offense. Tackles, and Chris Godwin. So I think that's free agency wise where we target.
I've been a fan of Kinlaw's for a while now. I kind of played a rotational piece in San Francisco. He gets a new jump. I think he had a good year with the Jets. He's a guy, Corey, that I agree. I've had my eye on for a while. I think he had a high pedigree. They're coming out of high school. And I think we're talking about the same similar player that Kinlaw played at South Carolina. And we're talking about Tonka Hemingway, another defensive tackle who was a high prodigy coming out of high school, had a decent college career, didn't live up to the 4 fringe 5-star potential. So, I mean, 2 for 1 potentially if we're getting Kinlaw in free agency and then taking a guy like Tonka Hemingway later in the draft. I mean, you got to getting 2 of the same player, just 4 or 5 years difference. I can see that working out for us.
Yeah, I don't know where Tonka's going to fall. After the combine, players kind of solidify their position. Right now, Tonka's projected to be like a 6th or 7th round pick. Defensive line is a position where we could double dip in the draft if we don't go out and invest in a guy like Kinlaw or my guy, Jaron Reed. You definitely need to invest in that position because I think Adams and Ogunjobi are going to be gone. I don't think that they're going to bring them back based on their play this year and what their price tag is. So I think double dipping and Kinlaw would solidify that defensive front, and Hemingway would be a good rotational piece in there. Being a late round draft pick, I don't think he'll come in and start right away. There's a few other guys in the draft that I like for the defensive line. Later in the draft, I think CJ West could go anywhere from 3rd round to 6th round. You just never know. And based on the combine and the interviews and the things that we don't see, it kind of places those guys there. Darius Alexander from Toledo, he had a great Senior Bowl.
Senior Bowl. Oh.
Yeah, he had a great Senior Bowl, and the Steelers loved those Toledo guys. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers go out and draft Darius in the 1st round or 2nd round if he falls, like Stephon Tuitt. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, another name to look out for.
Yeah.
I love Derek Harmon from Oregon. He's exactly what we need on our defensive line. He's my favorite defensive line prospect. He had more wins. His win rate was like off the charts. It was like 22% compared to the others at the position. This draft is really good for what the Steelers need positionally at the defensive line front. I think they could double dip and shore it up, or double dip in free agency.
Very deep draft as far as defensive linemen. I'm finding a lot of guys that might go as early as late day 2 in that third round category. As day 3 opens up, there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be quality NFL players coming off the board. I was really impressed with both defensive linemen from Notre Dame, one being Howard Cross, the third defensive end. Really good year, got a little banged up at the end of the year. And then also Riley Mills. Looks like a young J.J. Watt out there, just a huge figure. Very, very powerful, but also has a lot of finesse moves. Listen, I'm not saying he's the next J.J. Watt. I'm not. But on tape,
does he play end or does he play tackle?
He's like J.J. Watt. He floats around. Like, he can line up anywhere. He plays mostly interior. He looks the part, like at least 270, 280 pounds. Just a mammoth of a man. So I was watching a little bit of them.
Have you guys seen this Shamar Stewart out of A&M?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I like him. This draft is packed.
Oh, it's packed.
With
defensive line is packed.
Yeah. We can get a guy.
The guy from Ohio State, Tyleik Williams.
Yeah.
There's another guy, the guy from Kentucky.
The huge guy from Kentucky.
6'7", 340.
Yeah, did you guys just see Mike Tomlin talking to him at the Senior Bowl? Made Mike Tomlin look like one of us. I mean, this guy's huge.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully he's more dominant than that mammoth of a man we took out of Tennessee.
Hey, I liked him. It's like
Yeah, Daniel McCullers.
No, he stayed on the team for a while. There was another guy I think was drafted and didn't really produce. McCullers had to follow Casey Hampton, so we kind of had, like, it wasn't fair to McCullers.
He was so big. Like, I just remember
he was so big.
We all went to training camp last year. Seeing Darnell Washington in person, that is the biggest tight end I've ever seen. Like that. He's bigger than offensive tackles.
Yeah.
He needs to be a little bit bigger to command more targets, I think, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many offensive coordinators can float that guy out wide and say, oh, there's a 1.5 foot height difference, but I'm not going to throw the jump ball.
And we put him on a diet to where he just gained so much weight that he can play left tackle for us.
I think, honestly, towards the end of the year, I mean, there were certain situations where he was taking on edge rush. Like, he took on Hendrickson one-on-one and won. Like,
yeah.
He might be our best edge blocker.
Just put him at left tackle. I mean, he could be like the Villanueva project.
Yeah, the highlight of the season was him blocking, I forget who, into the stands.
Oh,
out of the end zone.
Darnell Washington might be the next jersey purchase.
It's just going to look wrong, though, because you're not 7 foot tall.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, you got to get the big and tall size. I mean, you got to do it justice. It's got to be down to your knees.
You got to get a 4XL.
I'm going to try and pick up his practice jersey at training camp.
Yeah, Corey's rocking the Najee Harris practice jersey, which is a cool thing the Steelers do. They sell their practice jerseys.
Oh, that's cool.
All right. So as we're getting into prospects, talk about the D-line being incredibly deep. Not as deep, but there's some guys at the safety position that are going to go towards the top of the draft. I think safety is one of the few positions it's very easy to scout. These guys got to be athletic. They got to be sure tacklers. Physical. You show a physical dominance in college that translates and says, I can play in the NFL. I can take on NFL running backs. You have to have an athleticism about you that says, I can cover, because they're asked to cover a lot of space. There's a couple guys, my draft crush already right now. Andrew Makuba, free safety out of Texas, 22 years old. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds. I mean, this guy's going to be a ball hawk free safety in the NFL. Clemson transfer, and we talked about it a little bit off air. You have to make the most of it. If you're going to take a leap, these guys that are going to transfer for 1 year, you have to get into the right system in college, and Makuba did. From Clemson to Texas, he has 69 tackles, 5 picks, 6 passes defended, game-winning interception to win the game in the college football playoff against Arizona State. You watch the tape, and Texas has it, arguably, money-wise, and if they're all on rookie contracts, I would honestly take Texas's secondary over the Steelers' secondary. Like, if I could just put them all on the rookie deals. Aaron at corner, they got another young guy. I think he's only a freshman or a sophomore. Stud corner. Makuba at safety. They're solid. They have a solid secondary, and Makuba stands out.
Who's your draft comp for Makuba?
So I've been working on this, and to be honest with you, the first couple of years we brought Minka Fitzpatrick over from Miami. He reminds me of Minka. So
I think his versatility and his competitiveness reminds me of Minka. I can't say that Minka's would be my draft comp. I think that kid out of Illinois last year, he may have went to Denver. I could play corner, could play safety, and he went in the second round where I think Makuba is going to end up going. Illinois had an amazing secondary the year before, and they all got drafted last year.
yes, because they had Witherspoon.
Yeah, they had Witherspoon at corner.
I remember he was the highlight of it. Their secondary reminded me of Texas's secondary this year, where it's like I would take all of these guys if I could. Barron, he's going to be a fringe first round, second round corner. I mean, Makuba, he's my draft crush right now. But another guy, Lathan Ransom, he's more of a strong safety from Ohio State. 22 years old, 6'1", 210 pounds. He's a box safety. He's a hard hitter. Not that Makuba's not. Makuba had that hit on Georgia's backup quarterback in the SEC championship, one of the biggest hits I've ever seen. But 75 tackles, 3 career INTs, a sure tackler, big body, somebody that I see translating well into the NFL. Corey, I'll let you touch on a draft prospect or two.
Sure, yeah. So we brought up Shamar Stewart, Mason Taylor, the tight end out of LSU. I know we want to go at these athletic playmakers, try and gear up the offense moving into next year. Somebody that can really keep the pace with Fields. 2 wide receivers I like. They're a little different in some ways, similar in a lot. Colin Lacey, a wide receiver out of Louisville. He had a down year this past year. I think he only played in 1 game, was injured in 1 game. 2023, though, he had 1,300 receiving yards, 15 yards per catch. The kid's quick. He's very agile. I think he's got the ball skills. 5'10", 190. Let's just talk about in the NFL last year. The top 10 receivers, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra, Malik Neighbors, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigma, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy. The measurements of those guys, respectively, 6 foot 205, 6 foot 202, 6 foot 200, 6'1", 195, 6'2", 200, 6 foot 183, 6 foot 197, 6 foot 210, and 6'1", 195. So that's in between 6 and 6'2", really 6 and 6'1", and 190 pounds to 205 pounds. Maybe, there's a standard deviation here or there. I mean, that is the top 10 receivers from last year outside of Drake London being 6'4" and Wan'Dale Robinson being 5'8". So with that in mind, and I'm not trying to just be, a combine height and weight guy, but when you watch Colin Lacey and another guy, Jalen Royals out of Utah State, these guys have those attributes where they're twitchy, but they're in one sense calm. They can gear up and gear down with ease. They have a presence on the field that commands respect from defensive backs, and they've got the ball skills to be able to bring the balls in inside their wingspan. All that, and after the catch, they can make DBs miss. They can make free safeties miss, and they're quick. So Colin Lacey and Jalen Royals, I think either of the two. Colin Lacey, I expect him to drop into day 3. I don't know. We'll see what happens at the combine. This is pre-combine. This is super early. Things change. He or Jalen Royals, I think, would help our offense a lot. And then for a running back, I know I talked about Javonte Williams a little bit earlier, but I think a guy that we can pair with Jalen is Jaden Blue out of Texas. He's really not very high on anybody's draft list right now. Again, this is pre-combine, but he's 6 foot, 200 pounds. He was a 4-star. I watch him in the playoffs. I watched him in their early game against Georgia. The guy is the Jahmyr Gibbs guy that is going to instantly elevate your offense. An offensive coordinator, I think, is going to look at him and not even know where to begin with the type of plays that we can draw up with him. He's good at pass catching. Really, I'm high on Jaden Blue, and I don't think the draft is going to be high on him, so I think there's going to be good value there.
I think Blue has good value because he was overshadowed at Texas. Similar to what we're getting into with the Ohio State running backs. They were kind of overshadowed. We've been talking about them. Jake's a Judkins hater. But
you can fine point them, but these Ohio State guys, I mean, we could take all 3 of them in our offense. Like you said about Texas's defense, let's have Texas's defense and Ohio State's offense, and we're going to be sitting very pretty in a couple of years.
But Texas offense also, I mean, we got Isaiah Bond coming in the draft, Matthew Golden,
Yeah.
Quinn Ewers, Gunnar Helm, both offensive tackles. Now you're talking about Blue, and I believe they have another running back that's just draft eligible, and I don't know if he declared yet or not. When you have so much offensive NFL talent in one college offense,
These are the teams that spent the most money,
yeah,
they spend it wisely. So
but they're going to get overshadowed because there's not enough carries to go around. There's not enough touches. It's similar to the Ohio State running backs. I mean, we're kind of mid-round guys, but they both made plays. They end up winning a national championship. Henderson took that screen pass to the house. Judkins had some incredible runs against Notre Dame. If Texas wins the national championship and Blue has that big game, similar to what these Ohio State guys are doing, he's climbing up the draft boards as well. So, yeah, I like him.
yeah, he wasn't even rated by Pro Football Focus or CBS. It's a ways before the combine, but
And it's such a deep draft in running backs. Running back this year, it might be the best running back draft ever.
if the Steelers want to, we could try to really invest in one of these Ohio State guys and then maybe double back, get an undrafted free agent in Blue. Possibly we don't even need Javonte Williams, or you can go out and get him, and we have a stable of agile and powerful running backs.
This is similar to what we just did, right? We drafted Najee and Warren the next year undrafted.
And Warren, kind of like this guy from Texas, didn't have a great stat sheet coming from college. And his situation was a little bit different. I don't think he went to a big school. I can't remember what school Warren went to.
Oklahoma State.
I think running back, it needs to be a scheme fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not entirely a Judkins hater. I think he could be a good player in the league, but we just seen what happens when you have a good running back in the wrong system with Najee Harris. I don't want to see 3 or 4 more years of that. I really want them to bring back Warren, and there's no guarantee that they're going to do that because his contract's ended as well.
Likely, but
yeah, he's a restricted free agent, and I would like to see them bring him back around, 6 or 7 million. He's my favorite player on the offense. I think he's electric when he's healthy, and he's very competitive. I love Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. It might be a little too rich to go first round and select him. I don't know if he'll be there in the second round when the Steelers pick. I would love him in the third round. I think that second round is where he's going to end up going, and I don't think we're going to be in a position to take him unless we trade back.
acquire more picks.
This might be the year that we trade back and acquire more picks. I love the receiver you mentioned earlier, Matthew Golden. I think he is going to be a stud. I think he is going to be Odell Beckham when Odell Beckham first came into the league, or he's going to be Tank Dell. He's going to be a great receiver in the league, and he's going to start producing immediately, as is Egbuka. I don't know what your draft comp is for Egbuka. I mean, is it Jackson Smith?
Jackson Smith never jigged. Ohio State just produces these receivers out the wazoo. Granted, they all are a little different in their ways. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. is different. He's a little taller, more deep route. But
I could see a Luka and like a DK Metcalf as well. I mean, just a physical, in some sense, stout, but quick.
If we could acquire DK Metcalf and have George Pickens, we would be able to produce so many penalties. Can you imagine how many penalties we'd have a game?
you'd have to throw the ball down the field. Andy Reid, all these great offensive minds in the league, Ben Johnson, what have you, they do a good job of scheming up plays to get players open. But they also scheme up plays where they know there's a great chance to draw a penalty. They know that if they get one-on-one coverage and it might not be with their best player, chances are he's going to beat the defender to this spot. And if he does, the defender is going to be late.
The Joey Porter Jr. strategy.
The Bengals, how many? 5?
There's something weird there where it's almost like Terrell told him to do that. Like that was part of the game plan.
The Steelers will do that as they get closer to the goal line. Their goal line defense, it's smart. If it's first and goal from the 5 and they're running a zig out, yeah, if you're beat, grab a hold of them. Who cares? Now they get the first and goal at the 2.5 instead of an easy touchdown. But get back on topic. Guy I had circled because I was hoping he was a mid-round guy. Jalen Milroe, the quarterback out of Alabama. I was thinking, okay, well, if we bring Fields back, I was looking at maybe bringing a guy like Josh Dobbs, circle back to Pittsburgh to be, a veteran backup, mentor, brainiac. Then I was like, if we can slide a mid-round pick, especially if we're trading back, acquiring picks, taking a shot on Jalen Milroe. I was like, you watch his tape. It's pretty electric.
The Alabama fans did not like him though.
Oh, I know. No. I'm well aware. Also, Florida fans didn't like Richardson. I mean, you taking a risk on the athleticism. Listen, after watching the Senior Bowl, I crossed it out, but I'm going to talk about it. I want to bite the bullet. But 23 touchdowns, 6 INTs in 2023. That's a good year for him. Then they transitioned to the new coaching staff. 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions in 2024. But 20 rushing touchdowns. That's a solid number. And I agree. I wouldn't do it unless I acquired more picks. If he slides deep in the draft and we draft him just to run quarterback power and counter in the goal line,
I don't think you draft a sub-package guy.
you draft slot corners. I mean,
We draft Connor Haywards.
I agree, Jake.
The thing is if we run with Fields, if we're clicking and something happens to him, we can't bring in a guy that is so dissimilar that the offense stops working. And that's why I think there is still merit to the pick regardless of how his tape looks. If we can have him on the roster for $1,900,000, it seems not possible for an Alabama quarterback right now, but hey.
You say, what does that quarterback 3 really do? But Kyle Allen came in and threw a pass for a first down this year. Did he not? It happens. I might get dragged in the comments, whatever. But I mean, if he does slide to the 7th round because of a poor showing at the Senior Bowl, and if he has a poor showing at the Combine, I mean, this is a physical specimen. He's 6'2", 225. There's something there. It's huge inconsistencies.
He'll go undrafted, and we could put him at running back.
We could also shine him up, and another team might overpay. Quarterbacks, they can be hard to come by. I don't want to do it, but if I'm devil's advocate for Sean on Milrow, there's some silver linings there.
I just want to make it clear, I am not for drafting Jalen Milrow right now. I am off that bandwagon. But just saying, 20 rushing touchdowns. There's not a lot of running backs on our list that rushed for 20 rushing touchdowns this year. So
I'm pretty confident this is what the Steelers are going to do. They're going to bring back Fields. They haven't given any quarterback a lot of attention at the Senior Bowl, so I don't know if they're really scouting that position. Bruni mentioned in the interview that was one of his priorities, was to shore up the quarterback position this offseason. So I think that they will double dip in free agency. I think they're going to do something similar that they did last year with Russell Wilson and Fields is going to still be in the equation, but I think that they're going to go and get Daniel Jones, who is Ryan Tannehill 2.0. He's the most Ryan Tannehill of the Ryan Tannehills I've ever seen. He's fast. He can throw. He might even be a better fit in the Arthur Smith offense than Justin Fields, but that's someone to keep an eye on.
I went to the Giants game this year. I'm pretty sure Daniel Jones started off with like less than 3 incompletions through his first 20 passes. He hasn't put it all together, hasn't won a lot of games, but he's been on some bad teams with huge coaching turnovers over and over and over again. He's shown some things. He's shown some inconsistencies, but he's a guy I'd be willing to take a flyer on, especially like if there's a no pressure, probably a backup situation. Daniel Jones, I mean, he can sling it. He's mobile. You're right. He does fit the Arthur Smith offense almost better than Justin Fields, like on paper does.
Malik Neighbors was the offense in a few of the games that I watched, and he force fed him, and he was able to get him the ball. And when Darren Waller was on the team, he fed Darren Waller the ball.
That team really wasn't even trying to win. Obviously, the organization isn't going to come out and say that, but were they really giving Daniel Jones even like the mental buy-in from the organization? It's hard to say.
He went from terrible offensive line with some weapons, nothing great, to a good offensive line, lost weapon. And then I feel like this is the year that they said, okay, we give you Neighbors and a okay offensive line. Not great. It's still not great. And he also lost Saquon. Steeler game went to the wire. I thought it was over. I left a little early, tried to beat traffic, ended up watching at a bar on the North Shore. The Giants were driving.
He just kind of reminds me of like a Josh Rosen, like kind of just like
he does have that like
he has that face that you just want to punch.
You know what I mean? Like it's just it's the intangibles with him for me that's sour.
It's almost like having tattooed across your forehead.
I don't like to look in his eyes if you catch,
I feel you. That's how I was with Kenny Pickett. I could never look at Kenny Pickett and be like, man, this guy he's got it. I looked at him in the face and he just looked like he was defeated.
I don't know. My favorite quarterback of all time, not really, but one of my favorites to watch, Jay Cutler, had the most awful demeanor of all time.
He would still go out there and try to get 11 yards when he only needed 10,
Listen, I love Jay Cutler to this day. I think he's funny. I thought he was an average NFL quarterback, but gritty, tough, but on the sidelines and during the game, he looks like he just wanted to smoke a cigarette and head to the locker room.
Blake Bortles.
Yeah. Exactly. Just nonchalant.
Okay, guys. Are there any names that you guys want to bring up before we shut this down?
Hey, Corey touched on it. I'm watching a ton. He's mocked to the Steelers a lot. Emeka Egbuka. I'm diving all into him. I have yet to see a flaw. Not that he does everything superb. Not that he's one of those Malik Neighbors, one of those guys that's going to get top 5. He just does everything well. He blocks. He runs routes. He gets open. He has great hands. Low drop rate. Lowest of anybody that's draft eligible. Great all-around receiver. The Steelers would be lucky for him to fall to 21. And if he does, they got to snatch him up.
I don't think he has like the highest ceiling like a Jamar Chase, but his floor is so high.
Yeah.
You're guaranteed to get a number 1 or number 2 wide receiver out of Egbuka. Probably the safest player to draft.
His comp is Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I knew was going to be great. I wanted the Steelers to draft him. I had him like in every mock, and look what he did this year. I mean, he takes off. And he's in an offense with DK Metcalf. Yeah, you start out like that number 2. This could be the perfect situation for him to be that number 2 guy under Pickens. And then in a couple years, we'll see the same thing. We'll see him transcend. Towards the end of the year, Smith-Njigba had multiple games, 11, 12, 13 catches. He was having 160-yard games. He looked all pro out there. To me, that's Emeka Egbuka this year. Similar player, similar build, just does everything well. You guys?
I think the way that you feel about Andrew Makuba, I have similar feelings about Xavier Watts.
Yep.
I haven't mentioned him, but those two are kind of few and far between. There's not a lot. You're kind of splitting hairs between them. And they'll both probably be Pro Bowl safeties.
Agreed.
It's hard to tell where they're going to fall to, but yeah, he's a guy that I really like.
He's one of those guys I was talking about. The top 8 safeties this year, I think, are all going to be starting caliber NFL safeties. It happens every year. You can pinpoint which guys are going to be starters, and then toward the end of the draft, you get guys that are like your 3rd and 4th safety special teamers. Xavier Watts, plug and play, day 1, starting safety in this league. Kuba, Lansom, the kid from South Carolina, he's going to be a day 1 starter. They might not tear it up their rookie year, but by the time they hit their 2nd, 3rd year, these are 5, 6 to 8 interception guys making plays. Cornerstone of your defense. Watts is one of them.
Yeah, Makuba, the comp that I was trying to figure out what his name was earlier from Illinois, Quan Martin.
Oh, yeah.
And he was actually drafted in 2023. Not as physical as Makuba, but he was very versatile, and he plays for the Commanders now. Are there any corners that you guys really like? I know Will Johnson will be off the board by the time the Steelers pick. Barron, his draft stock has went up. The very versatile corner from Texas that can play slot or outside.
Anywhere in the secondary.
He could be there at 22, and then you could find your nickel cornerback for the future. I mean, we could have the nickel cornerback for the next 5 years at least with that first-round pick and 5th-year option. If we can get that kind of production.
Love Barron. As much as I love Makuba, but Barron's a first-round guy. Makuba right now, middle round 2, middle to round 3. So for Steelers, you're probably looking at round 2 for a safety. I mean, you're still paying Minka. Anyway, my later round comp would be Malachi Moore from Alabama. High pedigree. Alabama's defense really sunk downhill this year. But Malachi Moore was a bright spot. There's one game where there was one defensive collapse, and he was getting frustrated. Kind of sparked is this a immaturity issue? But to me, as I watch the tape, he produces turnovers, sure tackler, and he's a guy like Barron that plays all over the secondary. You're talking slot corner, you're talking nickel, he can play safety, kind of a Tyrann Mathieu type player where he played all over in college, just got to find his best spot or play him all over in the NFL. Tyrann Mathieu's played every position in the NFL. That's what I see when I see Barron and Malachi Moore.
Some mid-round corners would be Denzel Burke from Ohio State. I think a late 2nd, early 3rd round is where he's going to end up. And then Jabbar Muhammad. A lot of people have him projected like in the later rounds, and I've seen him mocked even in the early 2nd round. After the combine, we'll kind of know where he is positioned at. He might be a little rough around the edges, like any of these college players that aren't super polished. Mike Tomlin said before that he'll draft a player that he can coach. He's not going to shy away from coaching. So,
and a player that fits that mold, and I know the Steelers have already talked to him, Kobe Bryant. Kobe, Cobee, I believe, from Kansas. Undersized, I think 170 pounds. But this is a guy gritty, physical, sticky, willingness to tackle. Kobe Bryant's a guy for me that's a mid-round guy. I'm not enamored because when you're talking undersized,
6 foot 175.
Who's that guy for the Commanders?
Forbes, and his
Who
his footwork was so good. Like coming out of college, he was so fast, and he's too small.
Yeah, too thin.
Upton Stout
I like Stout.
from Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
He helped his draft stock with the Senior Bowl.
There's a lot of guys. The last guy actually I have on my list helped himself out to the Senior Bowl. Corey's Taylor, the tight end from LSU, hit the biggest, but also Luke Lachey, tight end from Iowa. Iowa produces great tight ends. He's 6'6", 247, only 4 career touchdowns, but anybody that watches Iowa does not throw the football, nor do they score, but they produce great NFL tight ends. I mean, we're talking Kittle, Hawkinson, Noah Fant. I mean, there's a lot. He's a guy.
How's his route running? Is he more of just like a blocker? Or?
I don't know. Good route running. That's what I think he improved his stock at the Senior Bowl. He really showcased himself, creating good separation, not just against linebackers, against safeties, which is huge. And what I like about the Senior Bowl, they're doing it in pads. I take a lot of stock in what they do, even some more than at the Combine. Combine, they're doing it in shorts. They're not even doing like real one-on-ones. It's routes against air. The Senior Bowl's legit. Last guy, stock riser at the Senior Bowl, Gray Zabel, offensive tackle out of North Dakota State. Man, he looked like a mauler out there. He probably transitions to play an inside in the NFL, but even so, I mean, think about this, guys. If you could draft a guy like Zabel, and if he does kick inside, imagine the future of the offensive line. Zabel, Frazier, McCormick. You have a wrestler, and then you have 2 Dakota boys that are just maulers repping the interior of your offensive line. If the Steelers find a way to get their hands on Gray Zabel, they got to do it. One of the most dominant offensive linemen down there.
You got to win in the trenches.
You do. Guys, I think this is a great first episode. We highlighted a lot of players. I think as this month progresses, fans can expect us to break it down position by position. We're going to look at areas the Steelers need to look at in free agency and the players that fit that mold. Maybe the players that are more pipe dream, but then the realistic options. And then we'll get into projections, what these players are projected to get salary cap-wise. Our favorite time of the year, we get closer to the draft. Combine's coming up. We'll see who the Steelers meet with, who the Steelers bring in on these top 30 visits. We're going to narrow it down. We're going to have a little competition going, mock drafts, run it back, see who can get the most picks. A lot of exciting stuff coming up. Best time of the year, honestly.
Thank you for coming to the soft opening of the Not Yinz Fathers podcast. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, any improvements that could be made. And thank you for lending us your ear. Here we go.